and then I stub my toe, my shin's gonna explode out of my leg. Now we are rolling. We are going 100 miles an hour. I do not know what I'm saying. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, and welcome back to Let's Talk with Tom, the show where I casually talk about any show I feel like talking about. Do y'all like video games? Do you like platformers? Do you like whip delay? Then you probably have played Castlevania. For those of you who do not know, maybe you're too young, maybe you're just not informed on this, but there's a game called Castlevania. It's considered one of the greatest games of all time, one of the most successful games of all time. Like, you know Zelda, you know Mario, you know Sonic. It's not quite at that level, but it's close. It's like around Metroid, and especially like the fact that Simon Belmont and Richter Belmont, who are Castlevania characters, are now in Smash. That's like the boost. That's like the thing that makes characters immortalized forever. That's how a lot of people found out about Metroid, at least from my generation. So when it comes to Castlevania, I'm personally somewhat familiar with the franchise. I've dabbled in a couple of the games. I'm not an expert on the lore. I've studied it enough to understand how to talk about this animated series that was based on it, but beyond that, I don't know the specifics of the lore. In fact, a lot of people I know who have played the games don't really know the specifics of the lore, so I don't feel too bad about that. So you may be thinking, why even make a Castlevania series? You might be thinking, how did this happen? Well, apparently back in 2003, Frederator Studios, the partner to the Roundtable, they helped us get this office. So, might be some bias in here. I'm kidding. There won't be. Stop lying on the internet. Me. So they got the rights to make a Castlevania animated property of some sort. It wasn't going to be a series initially. It was going to be a movie, actually. And in 2007, a guy named Warren Ellis wrote a script for that movie, which would later be adapted into season 1 of Castlevania, the animated series on Netflix, that we're talking about today. I keep saying things I feel like I don't have to say. But yeah, Warren Ellis wrote the script. That was converted into season 1. So for those of you who are a bit more familiar with the Castlevania franchise, maybe you only know it from Smash, you'll know that the main guy, like the main face of the Castlevania franchise is Simon Belmont. And also in Smash there's also Richter Belmont, but neither of those guys are the main character of this show. This show is starring Trevor Belmont. Trevor Belmont is from Castlevania 3, so are a lot of the characters and a lot of the story that this show is based on. Simon Belmont is a descendant of Trevor in the Belmont dynasty. Basically, the Belmonts are this family of vampire hunters. That's basically the whole show. Is it's like, yo, we gotta go get these vampires. The power of Christ compels you, but we really only care about Christ because we try to fight vampires. Get a priest in here, make this holy water so we can throw it on the vampires. We ain't doing communion out here. We just killing vampires. We out here fighting demons, trying to murk Dracula, and that's the whole Belmont mission statement. So Simon Belmont is the descendant of Trevor. Trevor's the descendant of Leon Belmont, who makes a couple quick, portrait cameos in this. And if you're wondering why Castlevania 1 and 2 have Simon Belmont and Castlevania 3 has Trevor Belmont, if Simon is the descendant of Trevor, so technically Trevor came before, but his game comes after. If you're wondering why that is, so is everybody else. The Castlevania timeline is a very strange beast that no one quite understands. Alright, I've talked enough about the background. We understand the background of this show. Let's talk about why this show is actually really important to animation today. In 2018, well actually now it's 2019, but the last season came out in 2018. What makes Castlevania really special, and why I think more people should talk about it, is there isn't another adult-oriented animated show out there like Castlevania. The action is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's probably the best action in an animated show I personally have ever witnessed. And it's disturbingly realistic, if not a little bit exaggerated. It's extremely gory, it's extremely graphic. People are getting sliced up. I'm probably not even going to be able to show the clips of that in this video because it's really brutal. They definitely use that TVMA rating to get away with a lot. Now the blood, the gore, the entrails, that all does serve in bringing the action to a new level, especially in the fact that it kind of makes the stakes feel more realistic because you'll see a lot of shows, they'll have a sword or something, and they'll go to slice someone's head off, and then they move at the last second. In Castlevania, they might not move, you might actually see someone get beheaded. It serves to show the intensity of what's going on, kind of like impact and weight of movements, and stuff that Castlevania does really well, because all the action, everything that hits is really heavy. It makes you feel the impact with the sound design and everything. It's just a really good example of how to do action well in animation. However, you don't really need to give people nightmares to have good action. You can tone down the blood and all that, but if you're going for that hyper-realistic type of style, then by all means, go ahead, have people get their chests ripped out. To be honest though, I feel like it's a little bit much in Castlevania. Not even the fact that it's like, oh, there's too much of this. It's more so just, it seems to come a little too easily at times. I feel like in the Castlevania universe, if I'm just walking through my house in the night and then I stub my toe, my shin's gonna explode out of my leg. Like, it can get a little ridiculous. Another thing that really makes the action work well is the direction of everything that's going on. Like, it's not the best visual direction I've ever seen, but I'm just saying that to say I've seen better. And the better was really good, and this is also really good. It's just not as good as probably the best I've ever seen. That's all I mean. Because I can watch all this stuff go on in this show, and I don't get lost. My eyes know where to go. And that's probably the most important thing when it comes to directing animation, is you want people to know where they should be looking, especially with action where there's a lot going on. It's not like some action where you watch it and you're like, I have no idea what's going on, like, someone help me. It's satisfying, it's easy to follow, it's high impact. When I think Castlevania, I think great action, which that's an earned association, so good on y'all. However, I will say that outside of the action, the animation can be a little stiff at times. Like during the high intensity sequences, the animation is always top notch, but when people are just kind of like chilling, talking, walking around, it kind of looks a little stiff. But it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, you know, if this homie's walking a little stiff, but then he like jumps up and does all this crazy stuff later in a fight, I'm okay with that. I think that's a worthy price to pay. Now, as far as the story goes, I feel like it gets a little overcomplicated at a point. Season 1 was great because it was just one simple arc. They knew what they wanted to accomplish. They went in, they did it. It was good. It was completed. They formed the trio of Alucard, Trevor, and Sypha. They developed Trevor from being a loose cannon alcoholic who doesn't care about anything. He's like, oh, your baby got eaten by a vampire? Well, I want to go get drunk, so I don't really care. Like, he doesn't feel like living up to the Belmont name. He just wants to get drunk and just have everyone leave him alone. He has this big coat on to close off the world. It doesn't really work as well as he hopes, but that's the intention very clearly. But then he sees injustices in the world. He sees things that he probably has the power to change. He sees the church treating people poorly, being like, you guys are the reason why these demons keep invading our towns and eating our people. When in reality, it's because they lynched Dracula's wife for being a witch, because she wanted to study science that she learned from Dracula. And he was like, well, you killed my only reason to care about humanity. So I'm gonna just send all my demon babies to eat your babies and eat your bishop's face in the church. And that's what he did. And everyone's like, but it's the people who are not the church who are the problem. Even though the church was the one who, they lynched his wife. And the church was like, well, no, it's everybody else. They're the problem. And Trevor sees this. He sees this injustice and he's like, well, I'm gonna have to take this off. I'm gonna have to show off my Belmont crest. I'm gonna have to actually do something, because y'all wildin' out here, and somebody's gotta do something about this. And it's that cool moment where he just takes off his coat and he's like, alright, I'm gonna weaponize these people, I'm gonna fight all these vampires, I'm gonna do what's right. And they have this whole mantra that's spoken where it's like, we don't care if we die, we care if we die without knowing we did our best. And it's like, you know what, that's a good message. And then you got to season 2, and season 2 was okay, but it got a little complicated. There were a lot of moving parts in this season as far as the story goes that I feel like didn't really need to be there. My tiny IQ couldn't understand what was going on. Not really, I understood what was going on, but I was like, this is dumb. Why? It doesn't need to be this complicated. Like, they introduced characters that they just killed off after giving like 2 full episodes of screen time. They had villains who, as a concept, were really cool and kind of menacing, and then they gave too much background on them. There's nothing wrong with a sympathetic villain, but you gotta balance it out. Isaac, I was like, dog, he could be really menacing and just terrifying and like making your skin crawl every time he's on the screen because he's just that intimidating. But they gave so much background on who he is to the point where I'm like, this is just another dude. And then even once they get to that point where it's like, all right, I have so much background that I'm not even like intimidated or scared of these guys. They keep going to the point where you're just like, all right, I know too much about these. Like, I don't need to know anything else about this dude's childhood. I'm good. I'm fine. Like, you don't have to keep going. And then they keep going, and it's like, all right. And then Dracula talks to Isaac about his feelings like 5 times, and it's like, this is a little too much. I understand why they did it with Dracula, because Dracula, they wanted him to be sympathetic, because they wanted there to be an emotional moment where Alucard kills him, where Dracula comes to his senses and realizes, oh my god, my son, I'm trying to kill my son.
My boy. I'm killing my boy.
I've become a monster, the person I was is dead, and then Alucard kills him, and I guess that kind of makes sense, but at the same time it's like, do you really have to kill him if he realizes now that what he is doing is wrong and he can't just change his ways and redeem himself? I'm not a vampire hunter. I don't know how this stuff works. The only villain I felt was really written well as far as like, don't give too much, don't give too little, I feel like it was Carmilla, because she's still menacing. She's still pretty menacing at the end of season 2. She's like Hector's dominatrix now. And like, they don't spend so much time on her that you feel comfortable with her. And the time they do spend with her makes her out to seem like a total sociopath, which works really well for what they're trying to do. But the main problem I had with season 2 was the fact that they took these characters, they took Alucard, Sypha, and Trevor, the 3 main characters that they built up in season 1. They built up this combination of characters just to throw them in a library and kind of ignore them for most of the season. Like, half of the season is spent having them just poke around a library and have little conversations that are like, oh, okay, that's kind of entertaining. But then, like, it's not balanced. There's not enough balance between the hype you have where you end season 1 with this shot on these 3 characters implying, oh, next season, like, you get really excited. You're like, next season, we're gonna see this team come together. And then they come together and they spend the time in a library not doing a lot in comparison to everything else that's going on. I'll give credit, though, at the end when they actually start doing stuff and the focus starts to shift back to Sypha, Trevor, and Alucard, the show actually really picks up at that point. Like, you start to understand, okay, this is the moment that everything's been building for, but I feel like they took a little too long to get there. Like, you have point A, and you have point B, and then you have all this space, and I feel like a lot of it could have been taken out, and then it would have felt a lot more engaging, it would have been a lot more entertaining. Overall, I would suggest watching Castlevania if you haven't, but like most of season 2 is one of those things where you kind of have it on in the background while you're doing something else. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Put your comments down below. Tell me what you think. Roll the outro. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.